You're gonna need a big approach. So serious.
I am Iron Man.
This is a tasty burger.
Welcome to the In Session Film Podcast.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the In Session Film Podcast. I'm your host, Ryan McQuaid.
You led better.
And welcome back to the show. We're back for round 2 of our movie series. The films of Wong Kar-wai. Jay, how's it been? It's been a week since we've done this. How you feeling, buddy?
I'm feeling great. Ready for part 2 of Wong Kar-wai. I mean, what a wonderful conversation we had our first time. Now we're talking about Days of Being Wild. I'll tell you what, the last few days have been wild. Because I was sick. Had to skip the main show yesterday. That was no fun.
Never any
but,
fun.
you know, outside of that, watched a little UFC. Okay.
You watched UFC?
I watched UFC. And
Jake Gyllenhaal?
Look, Roadhouse coming soon.
Theater near
Jake
you.
Gyllenhaal looking absolutely ripped. I'll give him that.
Looking
And
shredded like some beef.
Maybe one day he will be Wong Kar-wai's true American muse. Jake Gyllenhaal, Nora Jones in Thunderbolts 3.
My Blueberry Thunderbolts Nights. Yeah, no, I wouldn't partake you for a UFC guy. We've never talked about that before.
Weirdly, I used to be an enormous UFC guy,
just
specifically in high school.
I feel like that's when you want to be watching a bunch of guys beat the crap out of each other. Yeah.
When you got the greatest of all time fighting this weekend, you gotta check it out. And,
did he win?
He won.
Yeah.
In about 2.5 minutes.
That's the thing. Did you pay for it?
I did.
How much was that?
It was
if you don't mind me
split.
asking.
It's $80 all in. You get 4 guys in there. You're paying $20.
That's not bad.
If you go to a bar and watch it, you're spending more than $20. You know.
Yeah. Well, I've never. Most of those fights end in like a blink of an eye. But I guess that's boxing in general.
I will say the fight card was very good, and this is all going to tie in very tightly to our Wong Kar-wai.
Days of Being Wild.
Yeah. It was a great card, but you know what's maybe even better than that card is this movie.
Oh, okay. Oh, you want to just get right to it. Okay. Because we could have rambled on for, hey.
Oh, trust me. I know us. And we can ramble.
We can ramble.
If you want to go into the state of MMA in the late 2000s and how it peaked during that period, I got you.
Yeah,
and what they need to get back to that golden age, we can do it. But I just don't feel like this is the time or place to be doing that.
Yeah. No, that's fair. But we should go to more of a golden age, which was the 90s for cinema. Because it felt like that was the last great time we had independent cinema. You know what I'm saying? Maybe. A lot of people call that like the Renaissance. We've talked about that in previous episodes. About the 90s. Talked it with Soderbergh. We talked it with Spike.
We're living in a post-Sex, Lies, and Videotape world here. You know, things are different.
This is 1990, all right?
Yeah.
This is the same year as Goodfellas, right? Same year as Malcolm X, if I'm not mistaken. So, yeah, 1990s. Am I right? Check the notes.
Yeah, I mean, look, I was born then in this decade, so it's a good decade.
Same here. Great decade. Nothing wrong about it. And, we're here to talk about Wong Kar-wai's Days of Being Wild. Appreciate all the great feedback from our first episode. Great to be back doing this more on a consistent basis. So we might as well just jump right in. We might as well just do it.
Yeah.
Start talking about Days of Being Wild, which is directed, of course, by Wong Kar-wai. It stars Leslie Chung, Maggie Chung, Rebecca Pan, Andy Lau, Karina Lau, and Tommy Lee Young, right?
Tony Leung coming in from the top rope in a scene that is very straightforward and makes a lot of sense.
I think we can talk about that here in a little bit.
All right.
Right. So this is the second film in our Wong Kar-wai series. It's also the second film he ever directed. It's pretty wild, right? It's a little bit of a different, I would say, vibe. Last week was sort of like a crime romantic drama.
Mm-hmm.
This is just more of like I think this is more, Jay, wouldn't you say, along the lines of wouldn't you expect a Wong Kar-wai film to be? This is more the speed, right?
This is the beginning of Wong Kar-wai as we know him.
Exactly.
That's what this is.
So I'm curious from your perspective, doing this review today, since this is a first-time watch for you. What are your thoughts?
Second time watch. Watched it in December.
Oh, did you? Well, yes, I understand you watched it recently in December and you did some track back and you went and did all that.
Give me a little credit.
It's not like you saw this movie 7 years ago and are coming back to this. This is still a very fresh first-time watch for you.
Okay.
Essentially.
Okay.
So, without further ado, what did you think? Jay Ledbetter of Days of Being Wild.
This movie's pretty spectacular. I think this is a really, really great film. I mean, you mentioned it there at the top. This is kind of Wong Kar-wai coming into his own. You could say that his first film is a little bit of a gunfire thing. We certainly talked about how you see kind of the early stages of what he would become, but I think he is fully formed in just his second movie here. I mean, he had pretty much free reign to do whatever he wanted. This was a huge bomb. It's made no money. People did not get it.
No.
Even though Wong himself was like, yeah, I thought this was like really commercially accessible. I thought the crime thing was kind of, going down. I thought we were kind of past that a little bit. I thought this would maybe be the dawn of a new era, but nope. Apparently people in Korea actually threw stuff at the screen regularly when this movie was on because they absolutely hated it. But the film itself has aged impeccably. I mean, you look at kind of what he's exploring here. It's the Wong Kar-wai specialties. It's about the difficulty of love, almost the impossibility of love, and the subjectivity of time, and all of the visual motifs that we have come to know him for as a filmmaker. And it's got, of course, Maggie Cheung, who is one of his ultimate muses. And it's a film that is so lovely while also being so tragic and having some very overt symbolism at times, but also immense subtlety in others. Visually, this thing is an absolute knockout. You think about the very early parts of the film where we have these intense close-ups of Andy Lau and Maggie Cheung, where it's just as intimate as it can possibly get, and you have these very subjective shots where you'll see this very, very deep focus where, it's not doing this like shot, reverse shot thing. It will, for an entire dialogue exchange, have one person deeply in focus in the foreground while one person is completely out of focus in the background, which is really kind of getting you into that particular character's state of mind when you can see all of the micro expressions that are going on as they are both talking and listening in that scene. It's just a really compelling piece of filmmaking because, again, Wong is just, there's so many moments in this film where you just think, wow, I'm not used to seeing that choice made. And that happens so often in this movie. The thing that really struck me was the editing in this movie. And this will come about in his later films as well. And it's just his desire to play with time and things like that. Sometimes he'll cut, and it is very unclear at first how much time has passed, or if it's like a flashback or something that's happening after or something that's happening basically at the same time. And then he will totally establish when it occurs later, but it kind of puts you on your heels. And I think it's a really brilliant technique. And of course, this is his first film with cinematographer Christopher Doyle, who has a really fascinating story. He's an Australian guy who just was like, I don't want to live in Australia anymore. I'm going to go live in Asia. And he just kind of, bopped around Asia for a while, did some assisted on some movies and just became so ingrained in the Hong Kong film industry and became Wong Kar-wai's guy. And, even directed some films in Hong Kong as well. And his work here is immaculate. I mean, this is a gorgeous, gorgeous movie. It's so much different than As Tears Go By.
Yeah.
Which is this very colorful, hyper stylized film. And this film is very stylized, but in almost the inverse way that As Tears Go By is stylized. This is a very muted film. This does not have that, neo-noir feel to it. This is all about repression. And that is a word that we will use a lot talking about Wong Kar-wai films, but even the aesthetic of this film is repressed. He said in an interview that that was very purposeful. That was the visuals of this film were a reaction to his first film, which is to say, I wanted to show that I could do the exact opposite of what I did before. And it is just a gorgeous film to look at, and everything, the emphasis on things like clocks and the ticking sound that you hear all the time, or even the heavy rains that come down at many points in the film, which is another Wong special. He certainly has his things, and they are on display here to incredible effect. I think this is a really, really great movie, especially for a second film. Really, really great.
Yeah, I really like this movie too, Jay, and I think that, when we talked about his first film last week, I think we were speaking a lot to the style of it, how it is very much mirroring other directors of the time, while also bringing in his sensibilities that we mostly know. Even not seeing all of his films, we know from some of his films what he's truly capable of and known for. His lingering, his longing with the camera there, these beautifully singular colored palette sort of films, and how one color within that cinematography from Doyle, like you mentioned, could just kind of be its character within itself, and really shine through. I mean, the palette here is that of the color green. It's very much prominent throughout the film, almost like, even a fault at times. And, when you start looking up like just what the color green means, it's actually funny that you're mentioning that this movie is like the opposites, because this is the color green sort of represents like new beginnings and growth and wealth, stability, coming together. And this is very much a movie that's the opposite of any of those reactions and any of those sort of definitions of that color, because it's a movie about essentially not being able to stay together, wanting something that's not there, and people broken. I mean, they're heartbroken. They're wandering through the carnage of relationships, and how generational selfishness blends into the modern world. I mean, you have a character here, Yodi, who is immensely selfish because of the broken relationship with his adopted mother, the wanting to know of his real mother, and then who are the people he reacts the harshest to are the women that he is in relationships with, throwing them away, casting them aside, pushing them, shoving them, getting physical, getting
certainly
verbal.
An extension of As Tears Go By. Pretty similar protagonist here.
Yeah,
if you want to call him that. I guess.
Well, I would say that this protagonist is a little. You root a little less for him here than you would in that film,
which is funny because he's so violent in As Tears Go By.
He really is.
But he's he's very loyal.
He's very loyal. And there's a nature of violence to that character from that world that he works in and operates already. So there's that understanding of violence is always around him,
and he also shows a desire to grow.
Yes,
well.
and
he wants
also,
to get out of there.
He doesn't want to be a child anymore. He wants to be an adult. Really, that movie is, the more I think about it, just sort of like a Peter Pan allegory is really kind of perfect for that movie. And with this one, it's much more deeper than that. It's much more philosophical than that. And I think that's why audiences, because there's not action.
It's also a lot slower than
it's a lot slower. It's shorter, but it's also a lot slower, and it's a lot more. You have to think more.
There are so many shots where it's just like, whoa, he held that shot for like 4 seconds longer than I'm used to. That was weird.
It's weird, but it's also like,
I mean, it's great.
It's great because of the fact that he's pushing, because his last, as Tears Go By, it wasn't financially totally successful, but it wasn't like a
good
bomb.
Enough
it was
to get
like
a second movie made.
Exactly. It's good enough to like, okay, you showed your stuff, wasn't too bad. What do you got next? This is what you got. Audience went like, what the hell is this? I'm expecting you to grow to be the next John Woo, where you're like, those slow motion action sequences are going to be the rest of the film. And that's what kind of audiences wanted at the time. They didn't get that. Instead, they got this complex meta layer sort of romance, not even triangle. It's like a square, romance square.
Like
it feels
anti-romance.
Yeah.
Almost.
And it's very much that, because like none of these relationships work. It's all about the things said, but then unsaid, and not having the courage to say things, to express feelings and emotions that are deep down and locked inside. It's a very emotionally complex film. I do think that for the first 2/3 of it, it's a pretty spectacular film. And I think that it loses a bit of steam towards the end of the film. We can talk about the final shot. I think that's an interesting thing. Obviously, they already, if you read up on this, the intention was to make a sort of a sequel or to continue the storyline. Yeah. And of course, because it bombed, that did not happen. So he goes on and makes a couple other films, and then this movie becomes the spiritual prequel to In the Mood for Love, which is the movie that we will talk about in a couple weeks.
Yeah, they call it a soft trilogy with this, In the Mood for Love, and 2046.
Yeah, they are spiritually tied together. It's almost like to the extent of, for our listeners out there, like Dazed and Confused and Everybody Wants Some. Spiritually, they're together, but they have nothing. Sure. They have no characters tied to them. It's the mood and the sense of emotion that is really what ties it all together. And I do think that at the end, there's a lot that happens in that last 15 minutes of this movie. There is so much to unpack. And I don't think that, for me,
I think the stuff on the train is great.
I think that's great. I think the little bit of that before it's not my favorite. I think then
You're talking about the stuff at the train station?
Yeah, I'm thinking like the train station stuff. That's like where, like, the audience kind of wanted that big, like that more of that action sequence. Or
Wong is kind of like giving him the middle finger there, because that action sequence lasts like 45 seconds.
Yeah, so. It's also just like, it's not really particularly well shot, in my opinion, or
it's fine.
It's kind of like
not as good as the stuff in As Tears Go By.
No, it's not, and I think it's purposeful, but it's also just kind of like didn't need a bunch of like when the gangsters kind of walk in the door. I kind of sat there and was like, oh, okay, you're really just not trying to give an audience of that time what they want, and it's kind of great. But it also, like, for the flow of the film, for me, it's just a little jarring for me. I will say that. Yeah,
I certainly think Wong. I don't think that's what he was most interested in when he made this movie.
No, but I think that. That final shot, we'll talk about it. But I think you're right. I think like the last conversation on the train, what that means, where those characters are left off. And then obviously the sort of tie-ups with the girls. And then that final just long, almost 2-minute sequence up in that attic Tony Young. I mean, that's.
I think it's got to be longer than that.
Maybe it's like 3 minutes, which is crazy because this is like a 95-minute movie, and it's
just like a guy getting ready to go play cards.
Yeah, and you're like, what are we doing here? But it's just like, I mean, I don't know what you think of it. Does it tie? Do you think it? How does it tie into it? Because it's kind of wild. It's you're setting up something that never happens, but then technically it does kind of happen 5-6 films later. And you know what I mean?
Kind of. I don't think
kind of not even really.
I don't think they're the same.
It's not. No, they're not the same. But it's like
you
spiritually have him dressed like that later, and it's. I don't know. It's.
I mean, the clear parallel imagery is between that character and Yodi.
Yeah,
they kind of act in a similar way. They have a similar kind of swagger to them. They comb their hair the same way at one point. It does seem to be that it's like, one Yodi leaves and another Yodi
one opens
enters,
the door.
Right?
Yeah.
It's like this perpetual cycle of these type of young men, these destructive young men who think they have it all together and act like they are so above it all, but in the end will turn out to be just as broken or more broken than everybody else.
Well, and he's quiet too, so we
Yes.
don't necessarily, until we get to know him or until we understand him, there's usually probably something underneath. Not to excuse it, but there is something more than just what the clothes and the sleek back hair and
there's definitely a lot of iconography
Yeah.
being utilized in that last.
There's something underneath the surface that has made this person essentially this insecure.
Right. Well, that's what that is one of the most brilliant pieces of editing is the film is in that final train sequence. When he gets shot, it cuts to the flashback of Auntie adopting him, basically, which is this kind of implying pretty much that he's saying, maybe directly or indirectly, the reason that he is so distant to everyone around him is because he has grown up in an environment where he was basically used only as an accessory, as an asset to bring prosperity to Auntie. And it's this really fascinating dichotomy, this relationship between Auntie and Yodi, because Auntie clearly only took him in because she was going to get paid for it, but now she kind of resents him for being more appreciative of it. So it's this weird tug of war between the two of them, where Yodi kind of resents her for not being his real mother, and also obviously for hiding the identity of who his real mother is. And Auntie kind of resents him because he's not as loving as he wants him to be, as she wants him to be.
No, they have a massive strained relationship.
Yeah.
But it is to both of their fault, essentially.
Yes.
Because like you're mentioning, Jay, she is withholding this vital information that if somebody that is adopted wants to have that information, she's using it essentially as the only bargaining chip that she has left. And without knowing it, or maybe knowing it, not really understanding and being selfish in her own right, the damage that has inflicted on these two girls that we see in the film that Yodi is with, and the trail of other women that he has been with many times before. Because when he takes, Karina Lau's character upstairs, he goes, "How many you brought dozens of girls up here before?" And he goes, "Yeah." And it's very nonchalantly. It's not like even in a braggadocious way. It's very just kind of. It's just like, yeah, I've done it, and I'm not going to apologize for it, and I don't care what you think of it. And yet, these girls keep going up there, and they keep getting their hearts broken. There's a scene in this film that I think is absolutely fantastic, Jay. It's magnificent. It's one of like the best scenes I've seen in a long, long time. And it's between the two girls, and they're talking about Yodi and their experiences, the history. It's, I mean, people would make whole plays off of this scene, but it's just a 5-minute interaction between these two. And it speaks a lot to, and I think it's also a brilliant piece of writing, but it speaks to, Wong Kar-wai and Jeffrey Lau, who are the screenwriters here. It speaks to them about not only just showing Yodi's perspective and his story and everything and his trajectory of tragedy, but also assessing the damage that he has inflicted and speaking to that, and having these two characters essentially speak to their experience as well, not having to find commonality, but even though they kind of do, and there's a real blunt honesty in those scenes, Jay, that I found just absolutely magnificent.
Oh yeah, I mean it's an incredibly honest movie. It almost to the point sometimes where it hurts to watch, and
it's very, very honest. It's very, you can almost cringe, not like in a bad way, but just like we've probably been in those situations.
Feel
before.
for these people, yes, because it feels so real.
Yeah, that we,
even though it is a very stylish movie, but it's so expressionistic.
Yeah,
that the emotions really ring true.
Yeah,
which is the point. I mean, that's the Wong thing, and he does it extraordinarily well here, even with the colors. Where in this film, we'll see it later in the Mood for Love, where it's all these rich reds and things like that, which is a more kind of traditionally romantic thing, but also it provides that crazy sense of yearning. Here, it's kind of these muted blues and greens.
It's really dark greens.
Give this sense of, just like it looks like a sad movie kind of.
Yeah,
and it is for the most part. And I'll tell you, you talked about that scene. The part for me that just sings in this movie for me is the part when Li Jian, the Maggie Cheung character, and Andy Lau's policeman character, T-Day, I believe it is, when they start forming their bond together, it's like, oh, yeah, that's the guy who made In the Mood for Love. Yeah, that's of course.
Of course, yeah.
But I think kind of because of that, it is, to me, the best part of the movie. I mean, you might, maybe some people will say, oh, it's so, In the Mood for Love is so derivative of that I kind of don't like that as much. But for me, give me all that you got. It's that part of the film I think is absolutely immaculate. These two people who are just on the surface, you just see them together, and it's like, the reason that they should be together is because they're so broken and kind of like disillusioned. But is that really a reason for them to get together? And is it a good thing that these two people who are so broken didn't just like lean into their brokenness and get together, even though in the moment you think to yourself, obviously you two should be together. You guys seem like perfect for each other. This is magnetic. The imagery in those sequences is just beautiful. And I think if you want to just pick one image from this film that kind of sticks out in your mind, to me, it's the one where T-Day is standing in front of the phone booth.
Yeah, that shot is incredible.
That's the one, where he's not looking at the phone booth. He's just kind of thinking, he's clearly hoping that it rings. And it's heartbreaking.
Can I say a shot like that? I can easily see that in the greens used here, that's where, even more than the In the Mood for Love comparisons, like Days of Being Wild and the color palette and being in that alley, is definitely the influence of something like In Everything Everywhere All at Once. Because I felt that when I was watching this movie, I mean, obviously they're both completely different films, but in that sequence, in that film, it's very much leaning on the films of Wong Kar-wai. And we see a lot online when, like, Ki Kwan's winning all the Oscars and everything that goes with it right now, where he's in that suit. Yeah, and everything. It was when I was watching this film and I saw that moment by the phone booth, I was sitting there and going, that's the kind of elegance that you can get when you are sort of emulating or imitating a master like Wong Kar-wai, who's able to pull this off in a moment in which the film too, it's like it's in this voiceover, it's really well done, and there's so much sorrow though, and I was just thinking about it because this is about like a guy who he loves this woman, but he's not going to be with her because her heart's with somebody else, and she's heartbroken about it, and she's trying to get over it, and it's not right to try to essentially pounce on her heart with his feelings while she's still trying to figure out her own. And you're right, Jay, that's where the maturity of this screenplay comes into fold. So instead what he does is the most heartbreaking thing somebody can do when they're in love with somebody. They don't act upon it, and instead they stand and do something that you and I would sit there and be like, oh yeah, I'll go stand by a phone booth and wait. And if you ever need a shoulder to cry on, I'll be there.
It's a very romantic idea.
It's a very it's a throwaway gesture that most people would never react upon every single night, and yet he did. And it's shown in the film. It's so beautiful. It's beautiful, and it's heartbreaking. And then I think of that scene. You're absolutely right, because like there's the walk and talk and the honesty between the two of wanting something when somebody else doesn't want them. You know what I mean? And Maggie Cheung's performance is so great in this moment because movie once again starts with her just angelic face, and you think that that you kind of think that, oh, this movie is going to start with like a romance, because it starts with Yodi and her, at the place she works at. They're getting to really know each other. They're very intimate. It's starting on this path, and then after they make love, he throws her away. You know what I mean? And she's confused as to why. This is the case. Like, he makes moves on her, like, this minute of this day for the rest of our lives. It's our minute in time. And we're going to use that minute friendship to turn into 2 minutes, to turn into an hour, that turns into this relationship. And how time is used there to then manipulate her, but how also his time's been manipulated for his whole life by Auntie a lot, in a sense that his whole life, every minute of his day, he's been living a lie away from the mother that he perceives that would love him back if she just saw him. And then to see that he goes all the way.
And then the most tragic moment of the film
is to me the best shot. One of the best shots in this movie too is his mother looking out that window from her rich palace estate, essentially, and him walking away, and just that long, like you're saying, Jay, probably longer than it should be, but it hits the point home perfectly of him walking away. We never see an interaction between them, essentially, and it's just him walking away, and right then and there, he's been rejected, and his whole dream and his whole life has of wanting something beyond what he's had. And Auntie's sort of premonition that she tells him when he gets fed up with it finally comes true. And how deeply hurtful is it that instead of not living in the moment, embracing the love that essentially this woman that wanted to adopt him was giving him, and chasing after something that she probably knew and was trying to let him down easy. It's another thing to say it. It's one thing to live it, right?
Yeah. And I mean, that moment is really spectacular. And I love that it's not this long drawn out conversation of her rejecting him or anything, or him talking to the maids or whatever it may be. It is a hard cut to him. At first we see a gate, where this house is, which just gives us the impression that his mother is very well off. He came from a rich family that he never lived with. And then we just see him walking away in slow motion. One of the few times in this film, if maybe the only time, maybe the shootout has some slow-mo. I can't immediately recall, but Certainly one of the few times that they use slow motion.
Yeah,
in this movie.
it's very. No, I think the fight at the train station, it has a little bit of that.
But this is the real moment where the slow
yeah.
motion is utilized most effectively, and just this idea. This is one of my favorite motifs in the entire movie. My Letterboxd review just says a movie about the inherent power of turning around, and there is a lot of that in this film. And Yodi explicitly states in this moment, I didn't turn around because I didn't want her to ever see my face, because I never got to see hers. I didn't want to give her that pleasure.
Yeah.
And there are other moments in the film. There's that incredible shot where it almost becomes like supernatural for a moment. I mean, the style of the shot where Auntie turns over her shoulder when she's standing on her patio. It looks unlike any other shot in the entire movie, and it has this insane power to it. And maybe it's partly just because she's looking straight into the camera. I mean, she's looking right at the camera, and it just has it that when I saw this film for the first time, that shot made me like shake, because it just felt so out of the blue. And then we talked about that phone booth shot. T-Day will not look directly at the phone booth, right? He's while it is at the front of his mind, it's not in his periphery, because the periphery gives that thing power.
Yeah.
And the only person who kind of uses her eye line powerfully is Auntie in this film, and she's the least repressed person of all, even though in many ways she is also the most miserable. But she's the only person who kind of realizes that miserableness is inevitable, at least for the people in this film, and because of that, she's the most at peace with it. So it's that motif, I think, is really wonderful, and that scene where he goes to the big mansion and just walks away is so heartbreaking, especially for Yodi, who you feel like he's so close to starting to get it, and then he hits these walls, whether it's Auntie's arrogance or her stubbornness, or in this case, very important thing in his life that he now knows will never ever happen, him meeting his biological mother. It's just like forcing him back into his worst tendencies, and you just at that point, it's just going to get worse and worse and worse until he meets his actual literal demise at the end of this film, just because he just feels so battered by everything that has gone on around him, while also not realizing that he has done the same thing to those around him. So it's just, again, we talked about that perpetual cycle with the Tony Leung character at the end. There's this perpetual cycle of emotional abuse going on in this film too. It's very subtle. It's not yelling and screaming and all that stuff, because that's not the pitch that this movie is operating on, but it's there, and it kind of just chips away at your confidence and your ability to love and be loved, and that really is what the movie is about.
Yeah, and then when we find Yodi at the end of that sequence, when he's with this or walking away from his mother, the next time we find him is he's despair on the ground, drunk, alone, shattered.
Oh, that's a crazy cut too. You talk about some crazy editing. When that girl knocks on T-Day's door and says, what does she say? Like, are you alone, or something like that? And then it immediately hard cuts to Yodi drunk on the sidewalk. Right away, I was like, whoa, T-Day had a really crazy night there, until we kind of zoom in closer and you realize it's Yodi. That was a crazy editing. I mean, it's just, again, it's that Wong keeps you on your toes, Yeah,
there's never a moment where you can keep your
really
eyes
awesome.
away from it, because then you're going to miss something.
Or you'll get confused.
Yeah, you'll get confused, and then you kind of have to rewind it. Thank God you have to rewind. I had to rewind a couple of sequences when I was watching this. I had to rewind the end because I had to make sure that this was, because they're quick stuff, like the gunshot and everything. It's very, very quick by the end. And then, they're on the car, and you're trying to figure out, does he die? Does he live? You know what I mean? And whatnot. And it's very subtle. It's not like we're not looking at any like Marion Cotillard Dark Knight Rises death scenes here. You know what I mean? Like it's some subtle ass shit. And and so
put that on the poster.
Put that on the poster. But no, I don't. I like on paper what it's trying to do. I guess in the end, I don't know. I like the individuality of the stories and everything, and how they were sort of flowing and everything, and then it becomes, I think we kind of, because the girls interact and they have that great moment, and I thought that was so great. Then like the last 15, 20 minutes of this movie is like Yodi and Tide sort of like doing like almost like a road movie. You know what I mean? That's what it kind of feels like. They're right,
well,
and everything, and it's like, okay, I get what you're trying to do here and have them, and it's very convenient that Tide's here, but like it's also like, I don't know, it felt like even more the downfall didn't necessarily have to have him there, because of the fact that, like, honestly, the movie could probably ended with him drunk in the street, just with a close up, and then bing bam boom. It could have. I don't know what you think, but
I think there are many great parts after that. I mean, I think the last 5 minutes before the Tony Leung part are perfect. I mean, when like when they get in the boxcar and they're talking, that's it's just set on Today's face and just right there for the most part until it flashes at the end, and then you have that really great shot. I mean, he just shoots the outs. I mean, for me, watching these first two films, Wong Kar-wai, I'm reminded just how much, how gritty everything internally, everything inside is. But then when he gets outside, how luscious. And the only thing that really has like light in this movie is at the end when Yodi, essentially, it's a 30-year-old movie. It dies, and you have the light of this car, this train boxcar that they're in, and that's the only real time the movie has a sense of brightness to it. And and you can symbolize it as death, or you could just symbolize it as relief as well too. But it's quite powerful, that shot. There's just something about like the last 15 minutes of it. It just doesn't, for me, it doesn't all work, but I appreciate it. You know what I mean? Where it goes, I can
because then it gets to where it ends, which we'll talk about, I think probably a little bit more, but I do really like the sort of boldness and also just the straight up, I would say like normality and how interesting it is to end a movie the way he does here. Like it's the more we've talked about it, the more I've thought about it and everything, it's like it's sneakily really great. Like it's a really great sneaky.
Now you're talking
ending.
about the Tony Leung.
Yeah, that's some sneaky ass shit. Right there. That's really good.
I appreciate the boldness, I guess. And does it play, since there wasn't actually a sequel, is a valid question, I think. Mm-hmm. And I think there are parts of it that do. It certainly indulges in its own existence a little bit, but
a little bit.
But you talk about that last 15 minutes. Yeah, I mean, I enjoy it. I would rather it be there than not be there. I will say that. I would not have.
I'd rather you take I rather to see early on in a second film of a 10-film series somebody already taking a bold swing like that to end a movie rather than playing it safe. You know what I mean?
But it does to me
kind of that at all.
It kind of has this thing that I had when we saw Dune, where I was like, that's half a movie, right? I mean, like if there's no other movie, is that a good movie? I don't know. But
I think also you contextualized it earlier, is that it's a circle. We're talking about time and how.
Yes, I agree with that completely. Yeah.
Then it if we don't, it's not like Dune, where it's like the end of Dune, it literally, she says, like Zendaya says, this is only the beginning. It's like, no shit, you've got another movie to do. Yeah. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you're trying to set up a franchise here. This one is like, if you didn't have it, And I mean, it's ambitious to say, oh, we're going to try to make a sequel when the movie didn't come out and then it bombs. But it's like, yeah, if you don't want to do that, then you can just contextualize it to being like the mundanity of somebody looking, everybody trying to have this look and guys looking like this and everybody does the same thing is a really interesting kind of way to end it too. And also, I think that you when you were talking about it, there is a little bit of the fact that like, oh, there's so many Yodis out there, right? That are going to continue to hurt the ones around him and everything.
Kind of the point.
There is a little bit of that, but then there, I'm not to say that, Wong is completely cynical, but there is also the hope of like, yes, there's a ton of, there's a ton of Yodis out there and guys that look like this, and that you would hope that the cycle breaks, but there's not enough evidence to support that claim. You know what I mean?
Yeah, Wong is so fascinating because he is clearly such a believer and admirer of the general concept of love. He has this very romantic idea when it comes to love and sensuality and things like that. But also you see him do things in this movie like really undercut some of the most romantic ideals that Yodi has in the movie. There's this allegory throughout the film that Yodi likes to, it's kind of his go-to philosophy on life is, I've heard of this bird that has no legs and it flies for its entire life. It flies when it sleeps and it only lands one time in its life when it dies. Yeah. And that's how he lives his life. And that's, it's a good way to get girls when you use stories like that really kind of explain this worldview, however ludicrous that worldview may be. And then when they're in the boxcar at the end, Tide kind of unprompted recites the allegory back to him and just says, yeah, here's the thing. That bird was already dead to begin with. Like, he never lived a life at all because he never stopped and appreciated the things around him. And so clearly Wong, while he appreciates kind of this idea of this fast love and these repressed feelings, which are, because really the repression stems, or the desire for short-term joys stems from the repression or the rejection of long-term happiness, really. And so that's kind of the two sides of those allegorical bird stories there. And he does this incredible job of balancing both a love for the idea of it and also a realistic kind of pushback to that romanticism. So it's just a lot of layers to all this stuff, Ryan. We got layers here. We got a lot of layers. This is a big onion. It's a 95-minute onion that that I really, really, really like. Jay, we've got a good time on this. This has been a good review. Do you have any kind of final thoughts before we wrap this one up? We haven't talked about the guy who played Fly, who was in this film. And I'm going to find his name. Apologies. I'm going to look at my phone and find his name. Jackie Cheung,
who plays Zeb.
And who played Fly in the first film. I thought he was really fantastic.
Really great that he used like a cast of characters from his first film to come back and really use everybody all over him. And I mean, he does this throughout his filmography. He has a pretty good stable of actors. It's, it makes me think of all the greats that do that. It reminds me of when we did Powell and Pressburger and Altman and people like that.
Yeah.
They've got
their
friends do it with you. Yeah. People you trust. So, but what did you think of his performance?
I think he's really good here. He's very good at playing pathetic, which he is in both this film and As Tears Go By.
I think he's a little bit more nuanced in here and a little bit more.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, he's a pretty one-note character in the first film because that movie is a lot more one-note in a lot of ways than this movie is.
It's a first-time film. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's more of a genre movie. This is kind of indefinable.
Yeah.
You can't really put this in a corner in the way that you can.
I mean, I think it's
as
like
years go by.
it's a romantic drama,
Yeah, I mean, it's a romantic drama. It's
romantic tragedy.
got elements of crime film in it. It's
A
got a
romantic
lot
tragedy.
going
That's
on.
what I think. I think that's pretty good. And tragedies are usually dramas, so
yeah.
never seen a
that's
tragedy be
fair.
funny. You know
But
what I
that's
mean?
a lot
So-
harder to, there isn't the
wow.
easy pitch of, he's like gangsters, guns, love, that stuff. This is like, so these people are like really sad.
Yeah,
And,
they're really messed up.
But he's really good. Jackie Cheung, I think, is really good here. And especially, I think another one of the best scenes in the film is when he gives the car to Mimi.
No, I mean,
Or he gives the
kinda
money that he got for the car to Mimi.
Yeah, I mean, he kind of has to hit the hell out of her a little bit. You know what I mean?
Well, he did, which is not good. I will
Not
say
good.
that's not good.
Not good.
But also, there's this really heartbreaking exchange where he says, "I'm going to give you this money. Go find Yodi, and if you can't find him," and you can just feel like he's like about to shake as he says this or cry. He's just like, "And if you can't find him, maybe you'll come back to me." Even though he has been rejected at every single turn, he is pretty pathetic in the way that he has treated Mimi and kind of felt entitled to Mimi over the course of the film. And here you see him just broken to a degree where he's just like, I don't think I have anything. This is like my last shot, I think. So I might as well.
I think they
just
both
give you
kind of
all
have
this
that.
money.
Yeah, I mean, there's like the shot of.
There's the shot of Mimi at the end of the film that, to me, kind of shows that she'll make it through. Where she's in
It should be a.
kind of uncharacteristically vibrant clothing at the end of the film when she's about to go to Yodi's hotel or something like that.
Yeah.
And, we know she's about to be heartbroken and her journey is going to be for nothing. But in the end, I think there's this weird vitality to that moment that to me implies that she is going to get by almost better than any other character. And the thing we didn't talk about that I meant to bring up, you talked about the last 15 minutes. I totally understand how you could be put off by the kind of hard left turn into the gangster fight stuff.
Yeah.
But then we get, again, that one part with Auntie getting Yodi at the hospital, I think is really, really great and says a lot about Wong's mentality and his thoughts about the Yodi character in the first place. And then there's the absolutely spectacular moment where we see Li Zhen in the ticket booth at the soccer stadium, and she closes the door, and then we cut to the phone booth, and the phone rings, and it makes me want to crawl into a hole and die.
Well, that's what I was gonna say. Is that shot's so perfect, and then it's like, oh my god, the it rings, and you're like, God damn it, this movie. You know what I mean? And then it leads up to obviously Tony Leung, who's upstairs and getting ready to go out, and then it ends, and you're like, what? But like, then you think about it, and it's like, cool. You know what I mean? It's very tragic. I mean, you talked about it, Doyle Cinematography here, his work with Wong Kar-wai here this is the start of a very beautiful friendship and very significant friendship, I think, in partnership within cinema history, and especially modern cinema. And I just think that the longer this movie goes on, even in its romance, even in its tragedy, the darker that green palette becomes. And then when it's only till the end when this tragedy really hits do you see light. It's so purposeful in doing that, and it's really just like when you know already how you want to emote an audience with your color palette. It's then you're kind of right here for our audio listeners. You're in the palm of the hand. You know what I mean?
That is really the thing about him so far that I've noticed is just he
Gets it.
You know, you talk
and it's
about,
not like aesthetically
a lot
like
of
hard
times
on the eyes.
a lot of times manipulative is used derogatorily when describing film. But I mean this in the best way possible. He manipulates the viewer as well as just about anybody. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, he is able to portray what he wants to portray with such precision and put the viewer in the mindset that he wants them to be in at any given moment as well as anybody. And it really makes every moment hit as hard as it possibly could. And that's, you know, even more true in this film than it was in As Tears Go By. And we haven't even talked about his use of music, which he really starts to develop here, where he starts using, I guess I would call it reminds me of like Hawaii, a lot of the music in this movie. I don't know if that's accurate or not. I might be culturally ignorant in that regard, but that's the vibe I'm getting from some of this 1950s, 1960s music, where it is not this traditional kind of film score that you would hear. There's this song that's used 4 or 5 times, I think, over the course of the film.
Well, it's no different than the last film.
Really melancholic and does have this inherent sense of longing to it. And it's I've actually weirdly been listening to this soundtrack a lot, as much of it as there is on Spotify anyway. They have a playlist for Days of Being Wild. And I don't know how to pronounce any of the songs, but they're good. And
you don't want to read some out here and look even worse than.
All right, let's do it. Here we go.
I think we'll pass on that. I think we'll pass on that, buddy.
It's a good movie.
It's a very good movie. It's a very good movie, and I know that I think Brendan's seen this film, or maybe he was, and I know JD's going to catch up with it. They'll have thoughts on Letterboxd. We have a Letterboxd page at letterboxd.com/InSessionFilm, and yeah, that's gonna kind of do it here. If
what
you
are we
wanna,
covering next?
Well, we're gonna cover Chungking Express next. That's the
we
next
do need
film.
to mention. Yes, it is the next one.
It might be a little late. It might be a little late.
It is not the next one that he actually makes.
Oh.
He made, so after this film, just
here we
for a
go.
little
Here comes the
future
completist.
context.
Little completist here.
So this film bombed horribly. Just did absolutely nothing at the box office. So he was kind of in no man's land after this. He had to go back to screenwriting and just doing gun for hire writing stuff after this. And then he got the job for Ashes of Time, which is a much bigger production than anything that he's gotten yet. We're going to review that one 2 episodes from now. But he made that before he made Chungking Express. Hated the process of making that movie, and especially the editing process for that movie. And so then he was like, let's strip this back. I'm going to make Chungking Express. And then everything kind of changed for him. So
And he kind of
very interesting.
made maybe one of his more recognizable films to date.
Yes,
his
for
entire
sure.
career.
Although Days of Being Wild did win like every Hong Kong Oscar. You know, it did really well.
It did well.
It did really well.
Made him like the talk of the town.
Critically, yeah, but studios said, no, thank you. This movie made me feel bad.
I needed some money to help me with
There were only
crying.
like four gunshots in it.
Yeah, I mean,
What's going on, dude?
I mean, shoot, does that not sound like modern cinema? That it doesn't have any action and it's all, it makes you feel and everything.
It's crazy how movies just resist action.
But yeah, Chungking Express, that's coming out next week. It'll probably be later in the week because I will be at South by Southwest. Ooh, look at me. It's a little bit late in the process to try to get that out and everything, but we're going to try to get it out. If not, then we'll come back the next week. So if there is a week delay, you know that it was obviously it was Jay's fault, but
I'll do a solo episode on the short films of Wong Kar-wai.
I think that would be interesting, to say the least.
I think it might set records.
It might break the internet. That's what you're saying.
Yes.
But yeah, for all the other stuff, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, In Session Film. You want to donate to us, there's InSessionFilm.com/donate. There's the app, InSessionFilm.com/apps. Patreon, Patreon.com/InSessionFilm. There's always tiers and different things and bonus content we have over there. I know that there's been some Last of Us stuff recently and a bunch of other stuff like that. There's the In Session Film Store. You can find that at InSessionFilm.com. There's all that stuff there. There you can get like t-shirts and mugs and all the fun stuff from this podcast. Jay, any last thought before we get out of here?
Man, Oscars. Last episode before the Oscars. I'm thinking Triangle of Sadness has got it.
I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. It's probably like my 10 in the lineup, to be fair. So
I want it on the record. Not watching.
Oh, God. Here we go. So you do this every year, and then I see the text messages in our thread.
Do it.
I see. Yeah, but okay. To be fair, you can't watch the speeches either.
Not gonna do it. I'll watch whatever shows up on Twitter.
You can't do that either. No, you can't watch any of it.
The good stuff.
You can't watch any of it.
That's the whole point. It's 3.5 hours too long.
Yeah, but the point is that you're saying I don't want to watch the Oscars, and then you're just going to watch the clips. No, that's still watching the Oscars. That's giving them your attention.
Interesting.
Like if I said I'm not going to watch the Super Bowl, but then I watched highlights of it, I watched the damn Super Bowl at that point. You watched part of the Super Bowl. You didn't watch it all, but you watched the Super Bowl.
What if I just look at tweets of who won? Does that count?
I think that's fair. That's news.
All right, I'm gonna do that.
You know what I mean? But like, if you're
watching, are the speeches gonna come out like right after they happen?
They turn them around pretty quick. I mean, shoot. I mean, it is also Twitter. People turn that stuff around pretty quickly.
True.
If not, it's gonna be there the next morning, obviously. But yeah,
all right. I'm just gonna watch Top Gun Maverick.
Yeah, thank God it's gonna be over. Oscars.
Yeah, I think you're over it.
Dude, I'm always over it at this point. This is not a secret. Like, you cover this and do this all year long. It's a grueling task. And then I step away for 6 to 8 months, and I'd say, you know what? Let me do it again, because I'm a glutton for punishment. You know what I mean? But also too, we've got like
6 to 8 months. What are you talking about? It's like 3 months. You get
because can, right? I guess.
They're so late now that just restarts.
No, I was just talking about the beginning of the season. I wasn't talking about the actual ceremony.
Oh, well, now the horse race is like all year round.
Shoot, it is, because the last year's winner won from Sundance, and this year's winner is going to be from South by. So it's like next Berlin Film Festival, Tribeca, look out! You've got a next best picture on your hand. I mean, here's going to be a good question, Jay. Are the fall film festivals irrelevant now? Are they starting to get irrelevant?
Interesting.
Because you think about it, pandemic year, didn't really have film festivals, right? 2019, Parasite went to Cannes, premiered at Cannes, won the Palme d'Or. Sundance last year, Coda, South by Southwest, Everything Everywhere All at Once. Are the film festivals in the fall becoming a little bit irrelevant?
Well, this is something I've been putting a lot of thought into.
No, I'm just kind of saying, because like for years, right? Because the last big one to come from it was like a Green Book, because that premiered at Toronto and it went all the way. So I'm kind of curious, kind of thing. It's like a little food for thought when you think about it in the grand scheme of all the things. It's a
little delicious food for thought that maybe a character or two in a Wong Kar-wai movie would eat over and fall in love.
Yeah, it's like the hors d'oeuvre that they have before they have a beautiful conversation about the existential way that time flows throughout their relationship. It's just what we all want to hear. Anyway, thank you guys so much for listening. We'll see you all next time.
Bye.
Movies!